All right, so I just want to do a quick video on what we covered in class today. We just started our unit 3, electrons and atoms. So today we just kind of went over some of the relationships between like wavelength, frequency, energy, that kind of thing. And so I wanted to just make sure that just in case anyone was absent, they would have the opportunity to see this as well. So our handout here, I'm in the unit 3 notes packet that you guys just got today. All right, so it starts off just giving you a little bit of a background. Okay, so it says from fireworks to stars, the color of light is useful in finding out what's in matter. The emission of light by hydrogen and other atoms has played a key role in understanding the electronic structure of atoms. Trace materials, such as evidence from a crime scene, lead in paint, or mercury in drinking water, can be identified by heating or burning the materials and examining the colors of given light in the form of atomic emission spectra, which is also called bright line spectra. So this is going to be a fun unit because we're going to do one of the most fun labs that we have, I think, all year. And we get to burn different things and we get to see kind of like what colors they're going to be. It's called the flame test lab. So it's super fun. And there are a lot of practical applications for the things that you're going to learn in this unit. So I'm looking here next. It's talking about the separation of white light. All right, so when we talk about the separation of white light, we're thinking about something like a light bulb. Another thing that would have white light is just light from the sun. All right, light from the sun has all the different colors, but then occasionally when we have some water droplets in the air, they act as a prism and we get our beautiful rainbows. So white light here in this picture is going through this prism, all right, and then it's separating out into all the different colors. Let's just open this up. Okay, so the first question that this video is kind of guiding us to answer is, does all light travel the same speed? So we're looking at this table and we're noticing that we have all the different colors and we have photon energy and the unit is in joules. We have a wavelength range and the unit is in nanometers. And the speed, this is the speed of light, okay? 3.00 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. So you'll notice that where we have photon energy, as we move through the colors, our photon energy is increasing. All right, so our photon energy increases. And our measurement of wavelength as we move down is decreasing. But our speed is staying the same, stays the same. All right, so does all light travel at the same speed? Well, in this particular case, I think it is, and really in any case. I wrote no. Yes, it does. Okay, then it says, does all light have the same energy? So I'm looking through here and I'm looking at energy, and it definitely does not. Okay, it does not. These different wavelengths of light have different associated energies. All right, and then it says, does all light have the same wavelength? Nope, it does not. It does not. These wavelengths are associated with the colors that you see. And so now it's asking, what is the relationship between energy and wavelength? And this is a really, really important concept here. Okay, so we have our energy increasing as we move down, and then we have our wavelength decreasing. So the wavelength is just like the measurement in nanometers between two peaks of a wave. So like here to here. All right, so that would be like a wavelength. So let's say as the energy increases, the wavelength is decreasing. I went a little too far with my wave. The wavelength decreases. And when I say it decreases, I'm talking about the measurement in nanometers between the peaks. All right. So in a sense, it's getting longer. All right. But the measurement in nanometers um, is going to be decreasing. All right, I just said that totally backwards. All right, it's as the energy is increasing, the wavelength is decreasing. This is true. Okay, but it is not getting longer. All right, I don't know what is going on in the old brain. All right, so this is the relationship. As one goes up, the other goes down. So you're going to hear me all year long talk about inverse relationships and direct relationships. An inverse relationship, and this is something I really want you guys to pay attention to. Inverse. Okay, an inverse relationship basically means when one goes up, the other goes down, or when one goes down, the other goes up. And this, if it's inverse, it's happening proportionally. All right. So um, it's so like it's going up in some sort of predictable way because it has this inverse relationship. So it's going to go up as much as something goes down or vice versa. So the next thing it's showing here, it says separation of hydrogen's light into spectral lines. Okay, so the first thing we looked at over here was this light bulb. All right, and this light bulb had this white light. But now we're going to look at this one over here. And so the hydrogen gas is in a discharge tube. And this is kind of what the video is showing. So if you were absent, you want to go check it out. It's pretty cool. They're showing different elements in these discharge tubes, and we actually have these at school. And so this electromagnetic radiation is coming from this hydrogen gas discharge tube. It's kind of being concentrated like through these slits and into this prism. And then it's going to show us these different wavelengths of light. Okay, so we have our wavelengths down here of light, and these are the different colors that they are going to be associated with. So hydrogen here we see has four very distinct lines. And as we are moving from left to right, they're increasing in wavelength. So if they're increasing in wavelength, we know that our energy is going down. And on this side, as we move toward this side, our energy is going up. Okay. So that's the relationship that we established. All right, then it says which color of light corresponds to the shortest wavelength. So looking here on this emission spectrum, we see that the lowest or the shortest wavelength, let's say 410 nanometers, that is violet. And the next one says, well, what is the longest wavelength? So the longest wavelength is going to be out here. And that one is 656 nanometers, and it is responsible for the red light. So given what we know about the relationship between energy and wavelength, we could say that the highest energy is going to be the shortest wavelength because these are inversely related. And then the lowest energy is going to be the red, again, because we have that inverse relationship. All right, so we're moving down here, and it goes on to talk a little bit more about these spectral lines. They do act like a fingerprint. All right, so hydrogen's the only element that produces the four lines that you just saw. So if I am a scientist and I've collected some information and my instrument is showing me these specific four lines at these specific wavelengths, then I know that I have hydrogen. And so over here to the right, we have some different um, bright line emission spectrum, or spectra rather, and they're all different. Okay, sodium has this one line right here at 589 nanometers. Helium looks a little bit different. Iron looks different, and we can assume that these are different colors because if you go up here and look at this, you see that all these different colors are associated with these different wavelengths, and so that is why we would get all these different colors. So to dive in a little further, it's asking you to just think about electrons and protons, all right? Because electrons are really responsible for the different colors that we're seeing. And it has to do with atoms absorbing energy and releasing energy. So right here, the first question, it says electrons and protons, they are going to attract each other. We know that from our last unit. And then it says, as an electron gets closer to the nucleus, the attraction to the nucleus is going to get stronger. All right, we know that from the last chapter as well. or the last unit rather. All right, and then now here's a kind of a new concept. It says for an electron to move from an energy level close to the nucleus to an energy level far from the nucleus, it would need to gain or lose energy, it's asking. So let's see what this really looks like. We'll draw a little Bohr model right here. All right, this is going to be, we'll just like put this guy here. And let's say that we have our electron right here. So right now, this is like he's in the ground state. Okay, we call it. The ground state just means he's not excited. He's just kind of in his normal self. But then we can pretend, I mean, maybe even from the sun, maybe we had some electromagnetic radiation like coming from the sun and hitting and exciting this electron that's in this atom. What then happens is that he is going to absorb energy. Okay. And when he does, he's moving to a higher energy level. Okay. So he's going to like jump up to the outside. So if you are moving from in to out, all right, that is one way to look at it. Then you are absorbing. In to out absorbs. So another way of saying that would just be that the electron, when it's moving from an energy level close to the nucleus to an energy level far from the nucleus, it has to gain energy because we learned in the last unit that the lowest energy level is closest to the nucleus. And then as we move out into increasing energy levels, we have to be getting more energy in order to do that. I like to think of it kind of like a rocket ship. It's not a perfect analogy, but imagine like you're a rocket ship and you are on Earth. Okay, you've got to have a lot of energy in the form of fuel or whatever else to kind of get away from Earth and go into outer space. Again, not a perfect analogy, but we need to escape Earth's gravity. Okay. And so it's kind of similar in that way because you have like, you know, this attraction from the proton or electromagnetic interaction, and it wants to keep things close to it when they are close in proximity. All right, and then so it says for an electron to to move from an energy level far from the nucleus to an electron level that's close to the nucleus, and it's asking, will we gain or lose energy here? So now we're talking about starting out here and moving down to a lower energy level. When we do that, we're going to release some energy because if we started with more energy than we ended with, that energy had to go somewhere. All right. And when it did, it was leaving and usually in the form of light. Okay. So this is saying we need to lose energy if we're moving from high to low. All right. So out to in, there we go. Out to in is going to be losing. Okay. All right. Let me just make that more clear. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so it says, how are hydrogen spectral lines created? So here we have Bohr diagrams. So all of these Bohr diagrams are of hydrogen. And it says the arrow in this Bohr model is showing an electron transition. Did the electron absorb or release energy to make this transition? So we're starting at n equals 2. We're in that second energy level. And then we're moving to, let's see, it looks like n equals 5. Okay. And we are moving up, in to out. And if we're moving in to out, we know that we must be absorbing energy. We're absorbing energy. We know it because the electron moves, or let's say moved, from a lower energy level to a higher one. All right, from a lower energy level to a higher energy level. So that is the story with that. And now we're going to go into an opposite kind of scenario. So these are still hydrogen Bohr models, all right, but our electron is now starting at a high energy level and moving down, okay, so out to N, if you will. So they're all moving like this. All right, so it says, look at the arrows in these four Bohr models. The electron moves from a lower, or it's actually asking from a lower or higher energy state to a lower or higher uh, energy state. So we're starting off at a higher energy state and we're moving to a lower energy state, which is the opposite of what we did before. And when that happens, just like I was saying before, we're going to emit light. Okay, so these are our photons of light that are being released, and they are moving. There's these particles that are moving at a certain wavelength, and as such, they are associated with certain energy. Because we know that the relationship between energy and wavelength is that the shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy. All right, so then it asks us if it's absorbing heat or releasing heat. We know that we must be releasing because, I'm sorry, not heat, energy. We know we're releasing energy because we have a whole bunch of energy in that higher state, that higher energy state. And so to get down lower, that energy's got to go somewhere. We need to lose it if we want to get back down to our ground state. And so we're going to release it in the form of light. So it says label the model with the electron transition from n equals 5 to n equals 2. So we're looking for one that starts at the fifth energy level and then moves to energy level 2. All right, so we've got that labeled. It says, is light absorbed or released in the electron transition, and how do we know? So it's going to be released because the electron moves from higher energy to a lower energy level. Okay. All right. And we can see that we have a photon of light that's kind of like heading out of here. All right. That is what's being released there. It says which of hydrogen's spectral lines is created by the n equals 5 to n equals 2 transition. Okay, so now we have to kind of compare. So we have a violet light. Okay, these are our options. We have violet. Could I even actually like color it sort of the same? All right, so this one will be violet. And then we have like a blue violet, which that's the closest thing I've got. And then something like a blue green. All right, bear with me, not exactly blue green. And then red. Okay, so the shortest wavelength, it looks like, is going to be violet. So I'm looking here and I'm noticing that this one has the shortest wavelength. And so let's call it violet. And this one over here, he has the longest wavelength. And so I'm guessing he's got to be red. All right, he's got to be. And so now we have these two in between. So if violet is the shortest, the next shortest has to be blue violet. So that's what this one's going to be. And that leaves blue green down here. So this one's blue green. So the key takeaway here is that there is there is a relationship here between how many energy levels are being, I guess, how many energy levels you're falling from, I guess is one way to say it. Um, and the energy that is being emitted. All right, and so that kind of makes sense. So here we have a very short wavelength, and we're going all the way from n equals 6 to n equals 2. All right, so it's like the greatest amount of energy levels we are transitioning through. And so that leads to this high energy, very short wavelength um, light. And then C is going from 4, so N equals 4 to N equals 2. All right, this is the energy levels that we're going to. And again, not quite as many. And so you see that wavelength kind of get a little bit longer. And then D is it goes just from one energy level. So it starts at N equals 3 and it's moving to N equals 2. Okay. All right. So it says which of hydrogen's spectral lines is created by that transition? So it's blue, violet. We already answered that one. Blue, violet. And then it says compare the other three models by adding their electron transition and corresponding spectral line. So we did that already. Okay. All right, so now we're kind of moving on to something related more to these over here. Okay, so each one of these is like a fingerprint. They're very unique and special. You're going to learn soon in this unit that we have different like addresses almost for every single electron in on the entire periodic table. And the configuration of the electrons is largely responsible for what this looks like in the atom. And these things are kind of like fingerprints or social security numbers, or you only have one out there. So just like, our fingerprints, if we were like doing a crime, which of course we wouldn't be, but if we were, then we would have a fingerprint potentially that would get picked up by the police, and then the police would go to their database and they would say, okay, we have this fingerprint. Do we have another fingerprint like it? And then they would be able to identify me, assuming that they had my fingerprints, which I'm a teacher, and so they do. Okay, all teachers have to be fingerprinted, which is something you may not know. Okay, so I have this unknown sample here, and the ticket here, and what makes this so cool is that scientists use this kind of technology, this knowledge of science and of our atoms and of this bright line spectra to make identifications of what substances are on distant planets, because we can capture the electromagnetic radiation that is traveling to us from these distant places, and then we can analyze it. So here we have a whole bunch of different elements. So we're looking at lithium, hydrogen, helium, and sodium. And then we have this unknown sample, let's say. And so we need to figure out which one of these are in our sample. So let's look at lithium. So lithium has one line there and one line here, but I don't see these lines in my sample. Okay, they're not there. So right away, I know lithium cannot be one of the elements in my sample. All right, so now I have hydrogen. Hydrogen is right here. Oops, there we go. Hydrogen's right there, right there. So can I match up anything? So I got one here, and then one here, and then one here. All right, so every single one of these were in my sample, and so I know that this one is present. Okay, let's look at helium. Okay, so helium has a line here, and so does our sample. Helium has a line here, so does our sample. And this one as well, so does our sample. This one as well. This one as well. And this one as well. And so we know also that helium has to be in our sample. So sodium. Sodium has one. Let's be dark purple. All right, so sodium has one here, but we don't have one in our sample like that. So immediately I know that he cannot be one that is in our sample, even though he has another line that matches. He has to have all the lines match. So the only thing we have in our unknown is going to be our helium and our hydrogen. Oops, I wrote those in the wrong place. Helium and hydrogen go down here. It says which ones are not present in the unknown. So lithium and sodium are not present in the unknown. Okay, so this is all that we covered today. So I'm going to post these class notes and post this video, and hopefully, if anyone missed it or if you just need a little bit of a refresher, you can have that. But the big takeaways from this lesson, the relationship between energy and wavelength. So you got to remember, energy is increasing, wavelength is decreasing, or the other way around. Energy decreases, wavelength would increase. So that's a big takeaway. Another thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you understand these diagrams. Okay, these Bohr models, one of them is showing an electron moving from a lower state to a higher state. In that case, they are absorbing energy. So you want to make sure that you understand um, how to interpret these, because these down here, these others, are going to be releasing the energy. And so if you were to see that again, you want to be able to identify that. And then also, if I were to give you an unknown sample with for whatever bright line spectra of maybe something from a distant planet or something, and then I gave you others, that have specific element bright line spectra, then you are going to want to be able to identify what is present in our unknown sample. And so that is something that you will need to do. And it is a question that we sometimes will put on the FRQ, the free response part of your quiz, or I'm sorry, your test. So definitely just make sure that you are going over that. And if you need some more practice, I believe you have some in your practice packet as well. All right, thanks.